Our new chapter is chapter number 11, Reproduction in Plants. Reproduction. All living things being including plants and animals grow and produce young ones. The process by which living organisms produce young ones of their own kind is called reproduction. Let us understand how reproduction happens in plants. The plants can reproduce through asexual, vegetative, and sexual modes. Asexual reproduction. When an organism reproduces from the cells of the parent plant, it is called asexual reproduction. Asexual modes of reproduction in plants can take place in various ways. For example, budding, fragmentation, and spore formation. Budding. In this type of reproduction, a small outgrowth appears on the organism. This outgrowth is called the bud. These buds grow slowly and detach from the parent body to continue to grow independently. Sometimes the bud does not get detached and continue to live with the parent organism. Spore formation. Ferns and mosses reproduce by the process of spore formation. Spores are present in sorry. Spores are tiny microscopic bodies which have a protective hard coat. These protect them under the difficult environmental conditions. When favorable conditions return, each spore gives rise to new individual. Mushroom farming is done with the help of spawn which contains spores. Fragmentation. This takes place in a multicellular organism. When the organism grow, they split into fragments and each fragment develop into an individual organism. This process is called fragmentation. Many algae such as Spirogyra reproduce by fragmentation. Now the new topic is vegetative propagation by natural methods. Plants such as potato, banana and apple reproduce through vegetative parts such as roots, stems and leaves. This process is called vegetative propagation. This kind of reproduction does not require two parents, nor does it need any special organs for the new plants to grow. Thus the plants grow into a new plant from a single parent plant. Stem. In this method, a stem is cut from the parent plant and put into the soil. This stem slowly develops new roots and grows into a new plant. Subaerial stem like runners, suckers, and stolon have buds that grow as plantlets in plants such as common grass and chrysanthemum. Roots. The roots of plants have a special kind of buds called the adventitious buds. They grow leafy shoots at some distances away from the parent plant roots and develop their own roots. They eventually get detached from the parent plant. Some plants grown in this way are guava and sweet potato. Leaves. Leaves of some plants such as bryophyllum have notches on the margins. These eventually develop into small buds called adventitious buds. These buds can further develop into new plants under favorable condition. Now we will know about the vegetative propagation by artificial method. Cutting. In this method, a small piece of the stem of a plant is cut and put into the soil. The stem eventually develops its own roots and grows into a new plant. The rose plant can be reproduced using stem cutting. Grafting. Here a small branch of the plant called scion is tied with the stem of the rooted plant called a stalk of the same type. The joint is then covered with wax or clay or tied firmly with a string. After a few days, both the plant become one and develop into a new plant. Mango and lemon plants grow with this method. Layering. In layering, the lower branch of the plant is bent down and the tip is pushed into the ground and covered with the soil. After some time, roots develop into a new plant and the plant grows into a new plant. Jasmine and bougainvillea plants are grown by this method. Now our new topic is sexual reproduction in plants. This is the most common method of reproduction in flowering plant. The sexual reproduction requires male and female reproductive parts. The reproductive organ of the plant is the flower. The flower contains male and female reproductive organs or parts. There are some flowers which have both male and female reproductive parts. Such flowers are called bisexual flowers or hermaphrodites. For example, rose, china rose and brinjal. On the other hand, some flowers or plants have only male or female reproductive parts such as cucumber, papaya and corn. These flowers are called unisexual flower. The centermost part of the flower called the carpel or pistil is the female part of the flower. The pistil has a broad tip known as a stigma. The stigma narrows down into the style which goes into the ovary. The ovary lies at the base of the pistil and encloses the ovules. Inside each ovule lies a female cell called the ovum. The ovum is the female gamete or the egg cell. The male reproductive part of the flower is the stamen. Each stamen consists of a filament and anther. The anther contains the pollen grains. The pollen grain contains a male gametes or cell. Pollination. The transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the flower is called the pollination. The pollen grains can reach the stigma of the same flower or to that of the another flower of the same kind. On this basis, pollination can be of two types: self-pollination and cross-pollination. When pollen grains reach the stigma of the same flower, it is called self-pollination. Self-pollination takes place in only bisexual flowers. If pollen reaches the stigma of another flower of the same kind, it is called cross-pollination. Cross-pollination can take place in both unisexual and bisexual flowers. Fertilization. When the mature pollen grains reach the stigma, they get stuck to the stigma. This is because the tip of the stigma is very sticky due to the presence of sugary substances. The pollen grains' compatibility with the stigma depends on the recognition of the sticky substance by the pollen grains. Once the connection is done, the outer wall of the pollen grains bursts and produces a pollen tube carrying the male cells. The male gamete has to find a way to reach the female gamete, which is the egg cell present in the ovule of the ovary of the flower. Once the male cell reaches the female cell, they unite and fuse together, forming a fertilized cell called the zygote. This fusion of the male and female gamete is called fertilization. There can also be more than one pollen tube pushes its way through the style to reach the egg cell. Now the new topic is dispersal of seeds. The dispersal of seed is the scattering of the seeds to different places which may be far away. If all the seeds or fruits of a plant were to fall under the parent plant and grow, then it would have caused overcrowding in that limited area and the saplings would not get enough nutrients, light, air and space. Hence, for the survival of the plants, it is necessary that the seeds are dispersed at far off places distant from the parent tree where there is enough space to grow. The dispersal of seeds takes place through different mechanisms. Wind. Many seeds get dispersed by the blowing wind. They develop hair-like structures that offer resistance to air and get carried to long distances by the wind before falling on the ground. Cotton, maple and dandelion seeds are light and are dispersed by wind. Sometimes seeds are carried away by water. Seeds of lily, lotus and coconut are dispersed by water. Now the new topic is germination of seed. The development of a seed into a new plant is called germination. Most of the seeds do not germinate or grow after their formation. They remain dormant or inactive for some time and start growing only under favorable conditions. They need moisture, oxygen and warmth to germinate. When all these conditions are favorable, then the seed germinates. There are different stages of germination of the seed. When seeds are sown in the soil, they absorb water from the soil. This helps the enzymes to become active in the seed. The enzymes digest the stored food in the cotyledons and make it soluble. The soluble food then diffuses in the embryo. This allows the radicle and the plumule to grow. The radicle grows first and comes out of the seed. It grows inward into the soil and starts to absorb water and minerals from the soil. The plumule comes out of the plant later. It comes out of the seed and grows upward into shoots and leaves. Thank you.